Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Europe is Coming podcast. And it is the next episode in our series of Behind the Scenes. And today we have Dan Williams, one of the founders of WIT. And if you've been paying attention online, you might hear that he's also starting a new project called The Fifth, which I'm very excited to talk to you about today, Dan. But very welcome. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I haven't shut up about the new concept online, so apologies for that.
Oh, I'm fully excited, and I can't wait to delve into it today. And as always, I'm joined by John Singleton. How are you, John? How's your week been?
I'm good. It feels like only a couple of days since we last spoke.
I think it was actually in reality.
Days. But we have an elite camp starting tomorrow, so some of the athletes are coming in. So it'll be fun. It's been a little while since we've done like off-season elite camp on the island, so it's nice to kick that off again with some new faces.
Nice, excellent. Yeah, I bet. Kind of start of the season again, which kind of seems like it's been taking ages, and now it's here. So back into the thick of it. So Dan, thank you very much for joining us. We do these behind the scenes episodes, which we talked a bit about before we started, where we like to really understand what happens kind of behind the scenes of CrossFit and and other fitness kind of spaces. And you've been plugged into CrossFit and the fitness space for a long time now. So for those like who aren't aware of you and whatever it takes and some of the things that you've been part of, what was your start? How did you get started into CrossFit and Hyrox and all this good stuff?
So yeah, like a kind of similar story to a lot of people like us who like touch the CrossFit space. So I think I had a cleaning business in the north of England in Leeds, which sounds about as glamorous as it was, if I'm honest. And whilst I was doing that, someone I worked with, her boyfriend, opened a CrossFit gym, CrossFit West Yorkshire in Leeds. A lot of people will know about that. Actually, one of the real OGs in the UK CrossFit community. So one day, she goes, we were going to Virgin Active. She goes, come to this new thing my husband's open, and whatever. And I kind of like took it with a pinch of salt. But then the moment I walked in, I knew like from day one, again, like most people, you do that first workout and you just like immediately hooked, especially if you've done sport when you're a little bit younger, like I had. It kind of brought back that competitive element and like camaraderie that I'd been missing for probably 10 years previously. Oh, I've lost you too. Can you see me?
Yeah. Sorry, I just shifted the camera onto you while you were talking.
I thought it cut out. Yeah, so kind of a typical CrossFit story. And then I fell into it and just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the community. Fell in love with the competitiveness. Fell in love with getting physically fit again. I'd been kind of out of the game for a few years. That's how it started. A warehouse in North Leeds.
Excellent. I mean, I know I had a similar story. Kind of found out about CrossFit, started training it, and then a friend of mine, actually, we mentioned Michael Price before we jumped on, but a friend of mine actually knew him. I worked with someone who was attached to the gym and kind of got involved in it that way. And it's always kind of a friend drags you there or someone that you know, and then you're kind of in it, right? And then how did that kind of expand to starting whatever it takes? And I mean, I remember when it started and going to your old site in Tottenham Court Road that was in the sports store. It's Intersport, wasn't it? In the basement or something.
Yeah.
I remember visiting that store. How did that get started?
So I'd been doing CrossFit about a year. Obviously fallen in love with it, but I in that year I actually sold the cleaning business in Leeds, and I was kind of just all I was actually really doing. It's typical of people that we've come across. I was basically training CrossFit. This was about kind of 10-12 years ago, full time, because I didn't have a job. But over the year I noticed that this obvious culture, like subculture of clothing, fashion, from footwear all the way up. So we would traditionally go to a gym in our rugby kit or athletics kit, whatever. You walk into a CrossFit gym, there's this like completely different fashion to what you see in the Globo gym down the road. And I started to go to competitions, started to visit other CrossFit gyms, and noticed that this wasn't just one gym in West Yorkshire. This was like at the time hundreds of gyms in the UK and Europe that were emerging with this like subculture of fashion. So my a friend of mine in Leeds, he recently moved down to London. He started working in sports retail, And what I was seeing on the ground with people like this like fashion movement, subculture, and footwear and clothing for training, he was seeing from a brand side, he was seeing brands like Reebok, Under Armour, and all the big brands starting to take fitness and training seriously as a sport. So I basically at that point had this crazy idea, thinking it's not just Reebok, although people were wearing Reebok clothing. It's not just Reebok that are focusing on this consumer. There's loads of small niche training brands in America focusing on this like fast growing community, and also the major brands including the most major brand Nike are starting to take this consumer seriously, and that consumer that trains as their sport, which was then only CrossFit. So we had this crazy idea to kind of bring the two together. I hopped on the next jumped in the car to London and moved to London effectively overnight. And then to your point, Adam, we started it offline. Actually, we started on an in real life pop-up kind of strategy, which we did in the City of London, Shoreditch, and East London over kind of a couple of year period, and really tapping into these people who saw training, again, then training was really only CrossFit, as their sport. And it kind of, so walking into that CrossFit gym entirely changed the trajectory of my life, really.
Very cool. And when you did the pop-up thing, how did you generate awareness? Because back then, it's not like it was now. I try and explain to people that I kind of know within CrossFit spaces now, who there was no Instagram really. It was kind of there, but it wasn't a tool for getting yourself known and talk about stuff. It was kind of Facebook and Facebook groups, and there was a bit on LinkedIn, but it was quite this whole social media thing where you can kind of get yourself known very quickly with a good message and a good hook and the right people and the right connections wasn't really available. So how were you going into gyms? How were you kind of connecting with people in the CrossFit space when you were doing the pop-ups?
Yeah, I think with any idea, that sometimes when you have a gut feeling that something can work, you kind of know that it can catch fire really quickly. And basically over a course of 2 years, I'd seen this like insatiable consumer with an insatiable demand for product, and they couldn't access it anywhere. They're ordering from America, or they're basically looking for more than Reebok. So we knew that the demand was there, and no one was serving it. So yeah, I think I'd spent basically 2 years in the CrossFit community, whether that's up north or going to CrossFit competitions, just getting to know people. So one, I knew there was demand, and two, I got to know some key people. And yeah, in the early stages in London, we were from up north, right? We didn't know anyone, so we just went round gym to gym, and I targeted only CrossFit gyms. So we would no interest in any other gym. We knew that niche customer was a customer that could kind of catch fire. So yeah, it was all just old school, hard work, grassroots. But I knew it would catch fire because I knew a customer wanted this product and couldn't acquire it anywhere. And I also knew the customer loved in real life experiences. They weren't necessarily searching online. They were wanted to come together as a community.
And how have you seen that? Oh, go on, John.
What year is all this? Is this pre-Reebok?
No, it was the height of Reebok. So it was 2014. So I think it's 2 years after they signed the deal. But the real Reebok were the Reebok made it obvious that that there was a consumer there, and they did incredibly well for CrossFit, the organization. But they also created awareness around that, the whole sport and movement. But it was Nike's entrance to the market that changed the game for us, because when Nike have categories, right? They've got football, they've got Jordan, they've got basketball. I think. Well, back then, pre-2012, training wasn't a category. Like they didn't have training in their store. It wasn't run basketball train. It was just run basketball like Jordan. So when Nike suddenly say we're getting behind the category, well, it's going to it really catch fire. So 2014 was that time where they were about to release the Metcon, and because we were very tuned into retail and consumer, we knew it was coming. So to your point, Adam, how do we gather awareness? Really, the Metcon was almost a conduit to the business taking off, because we knew that there's Nike. Everyone's a Nike super fan, right? If you're a sports fan, you're generally a Nike super fan, and a lot of those super fans were CrossFitters. So as soon as that shoe came in, it really kind of helped the business catch fire.
And had you moved site by then, or was that in the first site? Because again, for those that maybe weren't in London at the time, you kind of had your site in in the sports store. Then you had another one in Shoreditch, which is kind of underground under the Tesco's, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
And then obviously that you kind of exploded at that point, and then had your own site with your own gym. So can you kind of give us a bit of the transitional story and how that emerged?
Yeah, again, it's like fairly like it's like a playbook, a brand marketing playbook that I would still like recognize now and still advise anyone to use. It was almost like in real life grassroots marketing. Like we did that in gyms and in pop-ups. So low risk, short term properties where you could connect with people, but there was ultimately no huge cash handover. And we did that for a couple of years, like you said. We did 1 year in the city, 1 year in Shoreditch, and that allowed us to the customer. They thought we had these two amazing stores that we'd invested all this money in, and we had, but it was like minimal because they're temporary, really. So looking back, it's kind of the perfect playbook that I would still advise young brands to take. It's like, how do you build that awareness before really investing money in physical or a large amount into e-com? And I think we just did it successfully and before anyone had really seen that.
Yeah, nice. And then what was the jumping off point to kind of be like, we need a bigger site, we need to move? I imagine there's probably something around rent and sites and all that kind of the boring fun, the stuff that you have to deal with in having a store in London, but also the need to grow potentially.
Yeah, so I think it was two reasons. So firstly, actually the stores weren't making enough money to say, let's go and open a massive store. But what we were seeing was this huge growth online, and we could just see that the sport of fitness was growing. So it was partly gut feel, partly we could see the numbers online. And secondly, the reason we brought the big store to life, and for those that don't know, it was it's integrated retail training. So it had 4,000 square foot training space, 3,000 square foot retail space, seamlessly integrated. So really it was the first experiential retail on the market before anyone else has done it. And the reason we did that was because what I said earlier and what you guys know, in real life connection. And we knew that we weren't doing it to open a gym. We were doing it to have 500 living, breathing WIT ambassadors. If we could change their lives through fitness, those 500 people, and then get another 500 people a week in for events and stuff like that, is the perfect brand spotlight for us.
And is that when you decided, actually, we need to get into our own apparel? Because then you started building your own clothing, if I'm right.
Yeah, well, actually, no. So basically, So we opened that store, and then, like any gym, really, like any CrossFit gym, we started launching T-shirts. And I think we did this clever thing. I think our first 200 members, we get a black and gold T-shirt, and the brand was really cool then. And we had 200 members pre-launch. So that we realized quickly that we knew we weren't a gym, but it was very clear that if we layered on some apparel, it would do good money. But then we still didn't think about it. You've got to remember that we were selling we launch a Matt Fraser Metcon and we sell 2,000 pairs in 2 minutes, whereas to sell 2,000 T-shirts would take 6 months. So it was just merch at that point, and it was kind of a nice to have. So I think the real focus on apparel didn't really come until a few years later.
And what drove that, out of interest?
One's commercials, the margins just way bigger. Two, we were really reliant on our brand partners. So if there's any shifts in supply chain or dates, then you're really under threat, especially from Nike. And that actually did come back to haunt us later on. And also we just thought, it's a way to build the brand globally. And I think in the years, I think 2019, 2020, went to Wodapalooza, CrossFit Games. That's when our clothing kind of skyrocketed, because we were taking the experience of a store like gym and retail to these events, and people out there were thinking, "Oh my god, this is cool!" And that it was then that we actually started selling more T-shirts at the events than footwear. So we were like, "Oh, there is something here."
I was going to say that's one of the things I remember about the transition for WIT was actually seeing you at every comp, seeing this kind of big, kind of cool stand at every comp. And I wasn't sure if others had done that, but certainly saw a lot of other people start doing that more and more once you had kind of done that. And I don't know if again it's because I was quite plugged into what you were doing by that point or what, but that did seem to be kind of a key strategic part, was like that, like you say, that in-person experience, kind of touching the brand as an in-person experience at all these comps.
Yeah. So we wanted to showcase exactly what we did in London to anywhere we went. So like, our blueprint was like 2,000 square foot retail, 2,000 square foot training space. And at first, events were like, why do you want that? Because you can't just be like revenue per square foot will be minimal. But we knew that it would really engage people with the brand. So I think we did it Wodapalooza. We did it Sid first, then Wodapalooza. The Wodapalooza one was like super cool because like everyone was like, wow, there was no like back then. There was no, for those that have been to Wodapalooza, there's like a consumer training area. There was none of that. We provided the gym, so like everyone wanted to train. We knew that CrossFitters wanted to train, so let's put a gym there. And then in between, whilst they were training, you might have Sonny Webster, clean and jerking 200 kilos, and you might have Sarah and like Jamie and Elliot working out. So like it was really cool for the consumers to interact with them. So yeah, we just wanted to take the experience everywhere, really.
Yeah, I was going to say it's something that I had going to the early comps was like, oh, you kind of, it's like after watching one of the big announcement videos or something online, then you're like instantly want to go train because you kind of like super amped up, and you kind of had the same thing. You go to a comp, the CrossFit Games or wherever you go, and then you're like, oh, I want to work out. I'm like so hyped to work out. And having your stand at Sid, you can be like, oh, you can just go and do a workout now. We can kind of get involved. Or I know you had guest speakers. I think a couple of people from the back in when CrossFit had their own courses, a couple of the specialists, I think you hosted like mini seminars there and stuff. So super cool interactive way that you could get involved. And like you say, I hadn't really seen it done before.
Yeah, just because like, as we know, like, and people listening to this podcast will know, like when you love CrossFit, you like really love CrossFit. So you really want to hear from experts in the space. And I think we just recognize that. Oh, we loved CrossFit, right? So we just wanted to connect with people in CrossFit and like provide that for everyone else.
Dan, I just want to, because obviously from 2014 doing these spaces in the CrossFit, I mean, if you speak to anyone in the space, they all know that CrossFit was booming at that time. Like talk about the peak years, most people reference 2014 to 2018. But was it like a very big risk for you guys going from this? You opened in probably one of the most iconic places in London, which is why I think the space works so well. You're going from like selling in relatively basements, small stores, to all of a sudden opening under St. Paul's. Was that like a big risk for you guys, or was that something that was pretty calculated in?
I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, as I looked for property for my new concept, and I was trying to think back to what we felt like emotionally and like commercially at that time. I think we didn't overthink it, which is crazy. We knew we wanted to do what I just said, like create this like an experience which hadn't been created before for this new customer. And I guess, I mean, it's probably Sam more so than me, but definitely both of us like thought that the way we could do that was the only way we could do it was to have a big impact by where the site was and what it looked like. And there is there's a method behind that madness, because it meant the brand took off because everyone in the world knew about this space. When I see a cool gym space, you two will be the same on Instagram. I'm like, oh my God, I'd love to go there. And that's what we did back in the day with WIT. Everyone knew the space, and that's how they knew it. So I think we knew that it would have that impact. Commercially, we were naive, no doubt about it. I think our gut was leading our heads and our commercial intelligence. But it did work out because, like you said, John, it's an iconic location, as you can imagine. The rent comes with the iconic location, but the site actually worked. The site worked, like it was profitable, and so maybe that is that confidence and that gut feel was just right. But we were naive commercially. Like I'm way more like commercially intelligent now. Whether that's a good or bad thing, I'm not sure.
The thing that always fascinated me was how you managed to get competitive brands all activating in the same space. I think that was something, quite unique and quite special. That it seemed like, especially from an outside perspective, like Nike, Reebok, all the brands who wanted these huge brands who wanted to enter the space, wanted to activate with you guys, wanted to, release the Metcon there, release the new Nano there, whatever the shoe it was. And I think there was something about the energy and the momentum of that place that was very special.
Yeah, that was, you're right. I think we were lucky in that this consumer was taking off, right? The size of the consumer sport was taking off, and all the brands wanted to reach a consumer. But just like now, the game hasn't changed in retail. Like the big brands sometimes struggle to reach like a really niche, authentic consumer. And it's often a retailer led by people who understand the space that they use. So because at that point, like you said, the sport was crazy, we were the natural and only conduit in Europe. You had Rogue in the US, but even then and now, Rogue are equipment provider, but they do retail because they've got tens of thousands of people on the website. So even above Rogue, we were like, retail wise, we were like the only person to go to, really.
And I think it's hard because I think, Witt's obviously a success story, but then there's been lots of other issues, like other companies that have tried to do the same thing across Europe and didn't manage to get to that same level. There were lots of stores that were opening up who had this concept of selling multiple brands, but for whatever reason, they didn't get the same traction or same volume or same, I suppose, kind of stardom that Witt had. What do you think was the reasoning for that? Do you think it's just there's a timing thing, or do you think there's something else that's fit into it?
That's a good question. I think there's, like anything, there's an element of luck. So I think being in London, not that we're in London, we're in Leeds, but no, we didn't need to tell the brands that. But being in London is a key city for these brands, and it's it puts you in a prime position. London and the UK is second only to the US for brands. Now, people find that strange because we're a small country, 60 million people, whatever, in the UK. But we've got a huge consumer pool that partakes in sport and fitness. So we're always the second focus. There's no one doing it in the US, but we were like second best option. We're doing it in the UK. So we're in prime position. And to your point, John, like, there was other brands, like I'm friends with the guys at Fittest Freakish in Barcelona, super cool, very cool, arguably like the best brand marketeers out there of the lot. But because they were in Spain, they were at a disadvantage. The consumer pool in 2014 in Spain was tiny. It's quite mature now, but it was tiny then. I think there was a couple in Eastern Europe, one in Italy. You're right. So I think probably location would be the best, would be the primary reason. And then I think we were just good at speaking to the brands. You had me who was absolutely authentic to the space. I wasn't trying to be anything. I just did CrossFit. So that, as simple as that. And then you had Sam, who is like superb at building relationships, like superb at building brand relationships and managing, like to your point, managing the relationships between the brands. I think we just had a good approach to it.
And we've kind of talked about quite a long duration of time, and the space has changed an awful lot during that time. How do you feel like it's changed since you got into it, and then kind of maybe the height of Witt, kind of that 2019 sort of time, and where it is now? How do you feel like about the sort of journey of CrossFit and just the fitness space in the whole?
I mean, yeah, it's crazy, really. John alluded to the height of CrossFit was obviously 2014, 2018. Might make a comeback. I still think it kind of will to an extent, but because it was the only option for people that saw fitness as their sport. Then other people started to get involved, and other competitions maybe came into the market that were kind of CrossFit, but a bit more functional. And off the back of that, obviously, you've got the big one, High Rocks, and all they did was like make it known and knowable, standardized rather than known and unknowable. And they focused on the consumer, not the athlete. They just did those two things. And really, so that's where it's moved, and that's where it continues to move. I don't know where it will go, but with regards to the whole market, I think it's great. Like I feel sad that CrossFit's like seeing that a small decline, and people don't see it maybe as we do, because I still believe it's the greatest methodology out there. But for people in the space, you, me, the new apparel brand around the corner, the new nutrition brand around the corner, it's unbelievable. Like there's more, virtually half the population of the UK sees the gym as their sport. So it's great.
Yeah. And do you think that because as you mentioned, like WIT's quite evolved now, and there was a bit of a hiatus, like there was some period where, it kind of went away and it's back now. How do you see kind of WIT involved in what's going on at the moment and what's going to come in the future? Do you have like kind of a vision? Because it seemed like the vision back in the day, and correct me if I'm wrong, was about taking it to the consumers, getting consumers experiencing the brand and being involved and being there. But that seems to have changed now because you don't have a physical space. And what's kind of the vision for WIT in the new world?
I love the word hiatus. Is that a kind way of putting it? I think WIT has been on this like crazy journey which it was a success story, like John said. And I think it's only now that I kind of really think, yeah, we were a success story. We were a very large, like multi-million-pound company, but it didn't reach its potential. And it didn't reach its potential for a few reasons back then. And one of them was obviously circumstantial, COVID. And basically what happened there is what I alluded to earlier. Our supply chain was cut by our main supplier for almost a year. So when 50% of your revenue is cut overnight and your costs are based on achieving that revenue, 2 and 2 equals 4, the business is going to be in distress. So it was sad that there was those circumstances around it. But I think from a leadership perspective, we made mistakes we didn't diversify quick enough around own brand and things like that. If we had done that, we would have been defensible against what happened. So that was a big learning. And that leads on to what we're trying to do now. Like when Sam and I had the opportunity to acquire the business back with the Frasers Group here, it was only if we were going to lead with our own apparel. We had wanted to do that before, but our investors had disagreed with us. So we've come back, like you said, Adam, in a different form. We still work with brands, but only on quite unique footwear. And on an apparel front, we just do our own clothing. Now, to John's point, like how have we done that? Sometimes I don't know, because obviously the brands want us to stock their clothing as well. But I think we just came out of the blocks this time and said, no, this is our business model. We're building a clothing brand because we know the customer, and we're going to sell footwear to them. And we're still a great conduit for the brands because we still know the customer. We've got this database. The problem is it is challenging. Like that's the strategy, but it's challenging because we haven't got the store. So we have to go back to that grassroots kind of marketing tactics, supported with like the traditional like paid ads. And it's challenging because we're hard to understand because people still think we're a retailer, but we're not. We're really an apparel brand, and we've got some great clothing, but it's gaining that traction. So I think we're under no illusions that it's going to be difficult to relaunch a brand. But we're kind of making good progress. And I just think we couldn't turn down the opportunity to do it.
And because obviously I remember at One Games, it was in Madison, I believe.
Yeah.
And you guys started this the Icelandic clap. I think Sarah was there or something. I imagine it was just been incredible to go around. All the videos went viral. It was just something really special. Obviously you mentioned COVID. Is that really the reason that you think that the traction then just took off? It was like a black and white. All of a sudden you've got this rise, COVID happens. And a lot of businesses were obviously in the same position, especially ones who relied on, on supply chains coming through, and then Brexit, all of the other costs coming in started to impact that. But do you think it's, are there other things that you think, okay, well, what would you have done differently in order to keep that success going during the COVID time? You mentioned about relying heavily on the own brand. Is there anything else?
Yeah. There's a few things. It's quite. I've reflected a lot on my mistakes as like a leader at that time. And when I left WIT a few years ago, I kind of blame it on other circumstances and other people. But I think one of the things we would have done is we did all these big things, like you mentioned, like big store, big activation, Wodapalooza, big activation CrossFit Games. no, I don't think that was wrong because it exposed the brand, but I don't think we had the funds to back it up. So we thought we did, and we weren't being irresponsible, but we hadn't raised enough money in our investment round to support us should any of those things go slightly left field. So we kind of had no runway. We were relying on kind of everything continuing to go well. And I think we had an opportunity to raise a lot of money early on because we were like the golden child of retail. We were being talked about as the next kind of Gymshark. So we had a lot of options for funding, and we were very naive in what was possible. How to structure deals, like how to not give away as much equity as you want, or what's the balance. So we kind of we closed our first like large round too early, and the structure was wrong, and the structure came back to bite us. So that would be my absolute learning. And it's like when you're in a position of power as a business, you should take advantage of it and raise more than you think, because when you're in a position of weakness, you basically get completely screwed. So that would definitely be my biggest learning. And then I think probably a secondary learning would be probably just being a bit more commercially astute. Again, we operated too much on emotion and gut, which was great early on, but I don't think I had a strong enough team around me to kind of advise commercially. And I wasn't mature enough or experienced enough to make some of those decisions that I probably made. So if I start a business like I am at the moment, I'll always surround myself with like the people that can help me in those instances.
Just we've kind of talked about some of the heyday of CrossFit, just for my own curiosity. Have you got any of your kind of major highlights from those times? Whenever we talk to people, there's always like, oh, I went to this competition or got to meet this person or this really cool little thing. You must have some mega stories and little kind of highlights from that golden day of CrossFit.
Yeah, I mean, the mad thing is, like, I walked into a CrossFit gym in 2012 in Leeds, in North Leeds, and like 3-4 years later, I'm friends with all the athletes, and like just because of circumstances, I'm in the CrossFit head office in California signing deals, like we're going to the CrossFit Games. So you suddenly you're a bit of a super fan, right? So I think there's so many, like you say, but the first CrossFit Games I went to in LA definitely 100% stands out. It's just the tennis stadium, like the like clean ladders, the lifting. That was a fantastic year. My first year in Madison was fantastic when we had a stand for the first time. That was a massive moment. So that was a standout. Wodapalooza, we've mentioned. It's like the first time going to those big events is so special. John definitely pulled one out. The Icelandic clap in 2020 was very special, and that was on a whim. That was Sam Cornforth on a whim.
I was going to say, was that Sam?
Yeah, he just stood up because we basically, as you guys know, it was super popular to athletes stand and sign T-shirts or whatever at the front of the queue. It still is, but it was back then. It was actually mad. So we had like 1,000 people in the queue, and CrossFit were having to get us these barriers to stop people like walking in front of all the other stands. And because it was taking so long, we were like, Sam, you need to do something about this. So he stood up like with a speaker and just literally on the spot, just did it. And it was so special because it was, again, it's like one community, like just doing something on a whim, but understanding. Really, everyone understood each other, understood why it was being done, who was at the front of the line. It was special for Sarah, special for all of us. So I'd say that was right up there, yeah.
Nice, yeah. Shout out to Sam. I've got to meet him a couple of times. He's a good lad from all my experiences, and that's he's kind of really clutch in those moments, I think. That's very cool, very cool. And like, have you got anything that you've done recently where you're like, oh, I think there's going to be some bubbling? Are there any kind of things you're keeping an eye on where you're like, oh, I think there's going to be some spark off moments over here or there? Like, I haven't been to that many Hyroxes as like a spectator. I've only kind of done 1 or 2 as a participant. But is there anything that you're like, oh, watch this space? I think this is going to start to take off.
I mean, last year I was involved in one of the companies trying to acquire CrossFit. So I saw all sorts there, good and bad. But I did see a very strong company still that has the ability to come back if the right company's in charge. By the way, the company I'm working with was not the right company. So luckily they didn't get it. But I've got faith in that happening if the right person acquires it. Hyrox obviously is going crazy and will continue to go crazy because there's so much opportunity for expansion there in new regions. I think people love that standardized format, and like if we're honest, like being CrossFitters, it is really accessible, low risk of injury. That you can do it in any gym you want. So I think that will keep going. I've heard a rumor that something else is bubbling in the background that we're all going to hear about in a few weeks. But I don't know. I don't know where that will go.
Okay, cool. Intriguing.
I got this is something that Adam and I discuss almost weekly. And I mean, you've been so close to everything, Dan. I'm because it seems like a weird world right now, just to frame the question, in the sense that I don't think CrossFit or training has ever been as popular as it has been right now. And yeah. I remember it's almost 20 years ago since I started CrossFit, and it's just crazy to think the change in the whole training world and how it's evolved. And ironically, it seems like it just keeps going up and up. We talk about the events each weekend, Hyrox getting events with 40, 50,000 people, 1.2 million people doing it in a year. And I think with the amount of like unofficial Hyrox events or fitness events, you can probably 10x that number of people competing around the world. But we speak to people in the CrossFit space, and that same kind of generally the same excitement and same momentum isn't shared. And it seems strange because you're like, there's this thing that really set the foundation of this growth of training. And why do you think that CrossFit hasn't managed to optimize in terms of growth and numbers with the boom of training?
Yeah, it's such a hard question. That I think it's strange, isn't it? Because I talk about Hyrox having made it known and knowable, standardized, and focusing on the consumer. So you'd think, oh, that's the reason why CrossFit hasn't grown. But that's not, because CrossFit did focus on the consumer in affiliates. Like, remember that, because CrossFit wasn't the sport; it's the affiliates. The sport just grew off the back of the athletes. So they were the first people to do that, and there was this huge number of people doing CrossFit, 400,000 people doing the Open in whenever it was, 2018, 2019. So I don't think that's the problem. I think one of the main issues, from what I'm seeing in London at least, and in other cities, is that the affiliates, because it's so central, this affiliate is so central to the whole strategy and the growth, they're struggling, in many places, because the commercials of CrossFit affiliates don't stack up against some of these other concepts or these other gyms that cater for these other forms of fitness. Like, if I'm really going to simplify the whole thing, you just can't get enough people in a class. So it kind of stems the growth of singular gyms and also more gyms opening. And whereas like 2018, I don't know the stat. I've seen the statistics obviously last year when we were in due diligence, but the growth has stopped, like in virtually every country apart from, I think, South Korea and maybe France is an anomaly as well, Brazil. But the growth has stopped. Whereas back in 2018, 2019, there's a CrossFit gym opening on every corner, even in London and the UK. But I think like the fact that maybe the methodology hasn't adapted to fit more people in a class or something like that, maybe I'm overcomplicating it. The stem of growth of affiliates has stopped the growth of CrossFit effectively.
And this is obviously a very hypothetical question, but how do you change that? Like, how do you? I think all three of us sitting on the call, everyone has that same connection with CrossFit. It had big impacts in, ultimately in their life over a significant period of time. And how do you regenerate that momentum for the brand?
I think the difficulty is here, so there's people like us, right, who love CrossFit. We love the fundamentals of it, and the fundamentals include Olympic lifting and gymnastics. those two like fairly complex things if you know, versus a Hyrox. So the problem is that when you got that mentality, but you don't look outside of that like we perhaps do, and you're stuck in that lane, then I don't think you can evolve with the market as it has, because you love those fundamentals so much. I actually think it needs changing from the ground up. So I think you know, for example, the training, the methodology in the level 1, 2, and 3, they correct me if I'm wrong, John. I don't think they've evolved. I don't think one line has evolved in 20 years in those training manuals or the courses. If I went to level 1 tomorrow, like I did in 2014, it would be the same. The problem is the market's not the same, as we've just discussed. Like the consumers like move to a, you know, arguably more day-to-day functional thing, like pushing sleds and pulling sleds and things like that. And perhaps they're not coming into the ecosystem because from the ground up, it's still built around the fundamentals. The problem is that we do love it, and people like us know the impact it can have. So I think people are kind of reticent to change it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a bit of defense to CrossFit, things have evolved slightly in the 20 years, especially when you look back at the old videos that come out. But I agree, and this is one of the things that we comment about, is I think 20 years ago, 15 years ago is extremely revolutionary in the sense that you go to a normal gym and you squatted below parallel, people would be like, that is bad for your knees. Mm. And no matter what you were around, like CrossFit, getting to people to move in this different way, to reach certain levels of intensity in their training, were just really beneficial for the training world at that time. But I think that message has got out loud and clear that moving your body in different ways is good. But and I agree with you in this sense, that there hasn't really been a step of like, what's the following next direction of this? You know, we've set this foundation. A lot of people get it, but there's no, they don't implement any technology, nothing new to kind of track data or be able to do anything like that. The training manual kind of stays the same, which I think as a foundation is fine, but it hasn't necessarily reached a younger audience or got people excited to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's like, I think if they, again, I'm by far an expert in this field, but it's like, if they could adapt that, it adapts what the level 1, 2, and 3 coaches in the affiliates are doing. It adapts what you're doing when you open an affiliate, and you know, members coming in the ecosystem aren't necessarily learning, you know, the fundamentals of back in the day. That it's modernized to just get them in the gym. Because the thing is, I think I said at the beginning of the call, I actually believe that it can make a comeback, the methodology and the sport and the brand, and because I think the Hyrox consumer will look for more if their gyms offer them more. The problem we've got at the moment is that, you know, everyone is jumping on the bandwagon of the, you know, just conditioning, like basic conditioning, and that they're almost like stopping strength training and like and any form of like weightlifting. So I think like if the gyms could offer both, and really good gyms do, right? They have like, they get you in via a conditioning kind of methodology, and then move you across to more CrossFit or strength focus. But most gyms are just saying, oh, well, that's not making us any money, so let's just drive 60 people through the class to push sleds.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point, and really interesting on the training side of things, especially with the birth of things like AI. More people are becoming more curious. There's a lot of chat online, YouTubers, people debating these topics has kind of become like a new fervor. I remember when I first started kind of coaching, it was like Barbell Shrugged, and that was kind of your lot, really. You kind of went on there and you listened to the podcast and you kind of were like, right, I'll educate them. Now you can go and everyone's a content creator, everyone's got an opinion, there's a big discourse around training. And I think as someone who's kept as level 1, level 2, you know, continuing, you kind of go back and you're like, well, like to your point, I'm being taught the same thing, but my own education through lots of different platforms, other certifications, other people in the space, you know, people like other trainers brought out education, things like from people who won the CrossFit Games like James Fitzgerald to all types of people, right? And now the education, the discourse around that is very different. So people going in, sitting in that and being taught nutrition from a a level of level 1 is like, well, this isn't really some of the other education, so do I discredit this together? So I think it does need to potentially evolve. So this isn't really a question, it's kind of more a comment on what you said. I think it is so true, and it is, I'd like to see it evolve. I'd like to see me go back to do a level 2 or whatever to renew my certification, and actually I get value from it rather than being taught the same stuff that I already sort of know, or practicing the same things that I'm already practicing on a daily basis. I think that would add value, and I feel like maybe that's something missing in the CrossFit space a little bit at the moment, is that value add to the community rather than, hey, we need you to support us community. It's like, what's the value add outside of just doing CAP programming or whatever it is?
Yeah.
So shifting gears, I'd love to talk about the fifth, where like we've mentioned it a few times, and we've kind of talked about spaces, and something that I love the idea. Firstly, I'm a big fan. I've kind of lived in gyms for a long time, and I think during COVID, a lot of people were like, well, I want to work here so I can then go and do an hour of training and stay in the community bubble that I've got going on. And it seems like the fifth is geared up to service that need.
I hope so, yeah. So basically, I'm trying to launch a members club which leads with fitness primarily. Fitness is the anchor to everything, and then it integrates focused workspace and like an environment for like a like-minded community to spend time together. And I think it's come from two things. One, firstly, kind of to your point, like at WIT, we kind of did it, but we did gym and retail rather than gym and social workspace. But people would spend all day there. It was painful, actually. It was like people would like traders would be there with their AirPods in, like in open gym. It's like you literally, the office is like 5 minutes down the road. And sometimes actually at WIT, there was traders doing deals in class, which we had to, I think, ban at some point. But yeah, that people would like be in and around the space all day. And then we've seen this shift in the last, I'd say, or I'm seeing this shift in the last year, couple of years, where there is this more there's a movement for integrated like wellness real estate. And what I mean by that is I'm seeing concepts that like where there's like buy to rent buildings, like co-living, where they integrate like workspace and wellness hubs into the same building. They're trying to create this like 360 offering. There's also these recovery spaces and wellness spaces that are opening, some of which do integrate workspace. So there's a couple there's one in London they're more F&B wellness, but they're doing a bit of workspace. And there's one in Austin, Texas, which has opened. And then there's another one in Texas, which is kind of performance focused. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do all that, but open a high performance club that is performance focused. And when I mean performance, I mean like previously people have seen athletics performance as just athletes, right? And professional performance is just like maybe FTSE 100 CEOs. But I don't see any reason why we can't create a high performance hub for people who want to be high performers athletically, and everyday people, and high performers professionally, everyday people. So I'm just trying to create a club that will do that.
Very cool. And when you say high performance, what is that? How do you think that looks? Because I feel like that's a term that gets kind of put around quite a lot now, especially, I mean, I've talked about this on the podcast. I'm kind of in the corporate world and I'm also in the training world, and both communities talk about high performance. It feels like, there's a podcast named High Performance now. It seems like it's such a buzz term to actually like people want to perform at a high level, and that has become like a real focus. So what does that mean to you at the moment?
Yeah, well, there's two reasons I'm kind of taking the performance approach, and I'll explain what it means. But I think the main reason I'm actually taking that approach is because I'm seeing too much of the like social wellness approach. I don't know if you've seen it, there's this like saying there's these social wellness hubs and clubs which like basically evolve around like sauna and recovery and workspace and people dialing out. And I think there's a lot of that, and I think that's great. I'm not encouraging hustle culture, but I'm encouraging, in my space, I'm encouraging people to dial in, really, whether that's their training or work or like social networking. But with regards to the fifth and high performance, it's going to have it's a gym. It's a really, really cool gym integrated with a really, really great workspace. Effectively, that's what it is. But what we're doing, bringing those two things together, is I'm trying to create an environment where there's a like-minded peer group in there that can benefit each other's progression, like professionally and personally, really. So high performance for me is the environment that people are in every day, whether that's on the gym floor or the workspace.
Very cool. And And how do you envisage kind of like the customer's like journey and experience with that? Are they, is it going to be kind of like a sort of a gym model where they kind of sign up to a membership and then it's like taking them through hey, by the way, also you could do this or you can do that? Or is it a targeted thing? Hey, come and experience this entire new thing?
Yeah, it's an entire new thing. So it's really a members club approach. So effectively, we'll run 3 memberships they'll entail the top to end of the facility. So gym, recovery, F&B, and workspace in that membership. So there'll be a small 25% of the space will be private offices for people between 1 and 15 people, brand businesses. And then kind of 50 to 75% of the workspace will be like hot desking and breakout space, F&B. And then the gym facility, hopefully, this is site dependent, kind of 3,000 to 4,000 square foot, 2 zones, 1 functional zone, which will host some classes, and 1 kind of open gym strength zone that will be open like all day, every day, that you can just come in and train as a team.
Exciting. And then go on, John.
I was just going to ask about, obviously location is presumably pretty key for this. Are you looking, is it like very central based in the same way that WIT was, or is it looking to move further out? Because this goes on. One thing I was hearing during COVID was a lot of the gyms in central London started struggling because there became a lot of home working and people were allowed to work from home so much. So what would happen is they go to the gym close to their home rather than go to the gym that was close to their work because of that change in dynamic. And so I don't know if that now affects how you look at things as well.
I think it affects how I just search for property. I think it's just hard. It's hard. I've done all sorts of data collection on this. And you can use the data as much as possible, but there is an element of risk attached. I think central London for my first site is unlikely, just because commercially it doesn't stack up. And to my point earlier, I'm not willing to just go on that gut feeling this time around, because this site's a bit bigger than WIT. So it won't be in suburbia, but it'll be kind of southwest corridor up to kind of probably from as low as Clapham Junction up through Vauxhall, Oval, Kennington, Elephant and Castle, Southwark, that kind of area. So central enough to come into town and use if you're coming from out of London, but also to your point, John, like close to where all the data suggests that my customer is living, basically.
Yeah, nice. Well, if you fancy a site in Surrey, which also maybe has a podcast studio, I'd be very keen on that.
We will have a podcast studio. We will have a podcast studio.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, there you go.
And have you kind of like got a timeline on this, like in terms of when you hope to start having this built?
I haven't got a timeline. I mean, I've got an idea would be at some point this year. So basically, it's super early stage. Like even though I've been banging on about LinkedIn, and the stuff I put on LinkedIn was just like, as you can tell, a 2-minute ChatGPT job with the images. But it's remarkable. People think it's like open or something. I'm like, just to zoom in and look at the people.
When can I come? What are your memberships?
But yeah, hopefully this year. But it relies on the property. I've got a couple of offers on properties, but there's a lot of back and forth with landlords. And to make this commercially work, I have to be in it with the landlord in respect to they need to be like helping us get the site fit out. And we need to raise money. So at the moment, I was obviously using my own capital. So I'm raising money. So all these things, it's like a puzzle. So I'm not going to rush it, but I also am aware, especially speaking to investors, that this wellness real estate thing that I'm talking about, whether it's my form or slightly different, is happening. And it's about to happen fast. So I need to kind of come to market with it.
For sure. And we've kind of talked about different training modalities. The one thing we kind of haven't mentioned is this term hybrid, which is interesting because it's obviously, you mentioned strength training, but there's also a conditioning element. And that CrossFit used to kind of be basically kind of what I think a lot of people consider hybrid, but there seems to be a pull away from CrossFit into more, I'm going to strength train and I'm going to train for things like high rocks and run and cycle and things like that. Is that something that you want to incorporate, or is it CrossFit, or is it just kind of like a blank space for training? How does that kind of look to you?
I think, again, the gym ops, I've got my own ideas about, but I might also be working with a current operator. But I think for me, that there's always going to be a large element of CrossFit methodology in the training, whether that's in the equipment or the classes that we put on. Will it be CrossFit terminology? Probably not, if I'm honest, because I'm trying to scale a business like quickly, and it probably isn't the right thing to do at the moment. But there'll definitely be a very significant strength foundation, like more so than the gym's just like plowing people through for conditioning. So yeah, it will always be central to anything I do. Even if I work with a gym operator, I'll try and make that kind of the core of the programming.
Yeah, exciting.
Are there any spaces that you're inspired by at the moment? You mentioned there are a couple in Austin in the States. Is there anyone doing anything in Europe? Because obviously there's this mix. I mean, like country clubs have been around for a very long time. And I imagine that kind of starts the base of this. Okay, it's not training focused. You had like golf clubs, tennis clubs, where, they're notorious for business and pleasure being had at the same time.
Yeah.
But is there anything more modern or any places that are like similar to the concept that you've been, I think, work well?
Yeah, there's one in Austin called Collective. I think they've got 3 sites now. Their approach is like very gym focused, so they're trying to bring that performance aspect that athletes would have access to the everyday person. So similar to mine, and less so workspace. So they are more gym focused. There's another one in Austin called Gevity. There's one so remember the old Reebok store on Fifth Avenue in New York? That has been acquired by Lifetime Fitness, and they've put a boutique Lifetime in there, which is basically kind of this, but without any workspace. It's like a members social club, let's say recovery, F&B, and like fitness performance. Aside from that, there's a few these social wellness clubs built around recovery in London, but there really isn't anything like they're the 2 or 3.
Am I right in thinking, because I was I lived around Elephant and Castle. I lived in Peckham for a while. It's very different now to how it was back then. But funny, was the ministry? I might be completely wrong in this, but Ministry of Sound was also offering like some kind of workspace gym setup as well.
We were tenants there actually. We're tenants there. Yeah, so very cool workspace. It's behind the Ministry of Sound, so they own that whole block. They must own that whole block, and it's like a industrial building converted to workspace, and they've got a good gym. They have got a good gym, but when I say good gym, it's just a good gym. It's not a great gym. And also, what I see with these workspaces, and I was a member of the ministry, so I can speak pretty firmly about it. They use the gym as a sales tool, but utilization is very, very low. And they don't drive community through the gym. They don't drive events through a gym. They don't drive class workouts. They don't drive community through the gym, whereas I'm driving everything through fitness. Theirs is still like an F&B, entertainment and workspace focus. But the ministry is definitely the best example. That is a good gym. You could really do everything you want in that gym, from CrossFit to high rocks to strength. It's just not a focus for them.
What do you think differentiates between a good gym and a great gym?
I think it's obviously equipment is one, and what the ability to do everything in the gym. And when I say everything, it can be, it could be, I'm talking like catering for all consumer like subsets. I think secondly, it's how the gym is activated. So, have you got coaches in there? Like, is there soft coaching at all times? As in, is there coaches like in and around the gym? Have you got classes running? If you haven't, like, it really can't be called like a community focused gym. Who's running it? Who's running the gym? Are they authentic? Are they buying into it? Are they there most of the day? All those things I'd say are most important.
Exciting. And in terms of your vision for this beyond the fitness is kind of like running events and getting like kind of similar thing you did with WIT, where it's like really bringing people into the space to experience it.
Exactly the same as that. I'm just going to use the same playbook. I'm going to every one day a week we'll have will be an events day. Like, so in the morning I'll run like kind of fitness events for members. like large like team workouts, and then in the evening for members only there'll be like a business focused summit every week, and then we will use the space with brand partners, whether that's WIT, Nike, run clubs. Like I just want it to be a hub for events, because I want the members to have access to everything they can that's out there really as part of their membership.
Yeah, super cool. And during this, you've mentioned a few times like your gut and some other things. Are you slightly off topic a little bit, but do you think there is a toolkit for being an entrepreneur or being within the industry that you kind of need to harness to make these decisions or grow these businesses?
I think as the gut's a big part of it, but obviously you need to be like more commercially astute than that. I think you just need to be sure that you've identified a gap in the market and the product to fill that gap. And whatever silo you're in, nutrition, clothing, gyms, because a lot of people, like a lot of entrepreneurs, have an idea and just isn't a market for it, or it's just a bad product. But so you really do have to do your research. And with this, my initial thing was I've got a gut feel that this is a concept that's needed. Then I've seen things in the US that are already starting that validates it already. Then you hear from investors that they're seeing similar decks that validates it. But really, it was all done through data analysis of the demographic, like how many people are working from home, how many like businesses and people is there in and around the health and wellness industry, and then my own kind of personal stuff on LinkedIn and Instagram. And with that, like for example, I've put a few posts on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I've got 470 people on my mailing list. So that kind of validates the idea as well. So I think validation is key.
Nice. And I once had a presentation from Google, and they were like, test and fail as cheaply and fastly as possible. So like they always gave like the McDonald's menu example. So like make a menu item, don't actually produce it, and then see how many people ask for the menu item, and that's your test and learn, which seems like a similar approach. You kind of like, I built this thing on ChatGPT and this idea, and then I'm going to start a mailing list, and then you got 400 people. You're like, okay, cool, there's a market.
Yeah, that's a difficult one though, because that again, with mine, I can't really. Yeah, I can do initial testing, but I can't really test to learn the site. So we're going back and forth at the moment. Me and the people I'm working with on it. It's like, when do we really say this is coming? Here's a pre-sale. Like sign up. Not pre-sale. Sign up for access. Like apply for membership. Because like I just said to you, we're some way off that. But that kind of, if that didn't work, I'd probably have the second thoughts about the site. And if it does work, it's great when you go to investors. You say, I've got 1,000 people on applying for membership. So like at some point, I've got to take that step, and it probably will be in the next few weeks or months, because to your point, like it's not a sure thing at the moment, and that will truly validate the idea.
And because obviously we've spoken about fitness being like super popular at the moment, which brands do you think have managed to pivot well into this kind of slight change from CrossFit being the fashion, HYROX, or this hybrid being the fashion? Any brands that you've seen that have really like lent in and done well?
It's interesting you say that. I was talking to someone about this on Monday. Is I don't think many brands have done it well, if any. Like pivoted all the brands that we knew, including WIT from the CrossFit brands. I don't think any have done it well. I mean, so Noble didn't do it well, obviously. WIT are trying to do it now, but to be confirmed. The brands that seemingly making an impact on HYROX are new brands, or they're brands that were already catering for the wider consumer, like Gymshark or Represent. I think in the US, like I've seen like 10,000cc. I don't know if you're aware of them. That the menswear brand is making good traction, and they were quite clever. They kind of stayed away from CrossFit. So HYROX was a natural thing for them because it was already the kind of aesthetic. But I don't know if any brands have pivoted that well. I think Rad probably will with the footwear. When they bring out a relevant shoe, they're already sponsoring HYROX athletes. I think when they bring out a relevant shoe, because they, as usual, they've picked the right athletes, it will do really well. But no, it hasn't been many transferables there.
There's one brand that I had listed down to speak to you about. Obviously, there's a lot of, similarity. I think that all the OG CrossFit community know Ben. From his time at the games, competing, owning gyms, and you guys obviously had a close relationship. And I think everyone has been nothing but impressed about how well they've managed to do as a brand and keep going. And it was to share some of your thoughts regarding that success. Why do you think they would manage to be successful in a classically or notoriously hard space to enter?
I think in a way it was similar to Whit, because like when I said at the beginning, like I knew from the outset at Whit that we had something. There was a consumer there, and if we launched, it would kind of take off. And when Ben first came to me and showed me the shoes and like told me about Rad, I knew immediately that it would take off, because I felt like the market was missing that challenger brand, which we thought was going to be Noble. And Noble were great, by the way. They grew into a large business, but they hadn't evolved, had they? They just kept one shoe, and the aesthetic was very conservative. So I could see that like most subcultures need a challenger brand, and this was it. And I think Ben had the same gut feeling it would take off. So I think initially there was just room in the market for a challenger. And I think why have they done so well since? Their brand is phenomenal. Their brand and marketing machine, the agency they work with, and Ben's creative mindset's phenomenal. That he's very like single-minded. Like he won't. He doesn't. It's kind of he kind of gets behind his decisions and like backs them 100%, which I think has stood him in good stead as an entrepreneur, whether dealing with investors or like product. And they've picked the right athletes. Like they seem to like have the magic touch with athletes. Like I remember when he was speaking to me about Danielle back in the day. This was a startup. They were a startup, and he was investing quite a lot of money in her, and it just worked. And it seems to work almost every time they pick an athlete. But I don't think that's luck. I think it's just like judgment. They know who fits the brand. He just understands his brand so well. When you build a brand, you can lose, like you can overthink your positioning. But I think Ben just knows it so well.
It's interesting, the topic of athletes. Again, something that myself and John have talked about on the podcast a few times is sort of modern day CrossFit athletes pull compared to sort of the heyday that we've talked about, that kind of 2018 time, and how big a pull the athletes have. Like, what do you think is going on there? And I don't know, I kind of know a bit about Hyrox. I don't know enough about the space, but the athletes don't seem to, as you said, it's more of a consumer first sort of product, if you like, than an athlete first product. But it doesn't feel like we're getting that athlete pull these days that we perhaps used to. I mean, Danielle seems to be a bit of an outlier. Maybe she's a bit of a bridging athlete between the kind of older times and the newer times. But I don't know enough about it. What's your thoughts around that?
That's a tricky question. I think it's probably largely down to the not demise. I don't know actually the word demise, but of the CrossFit brand and like the growth of Hyrox. Like people just aren't aware of these athletes, and they're kind of like people that did do CrossFit are aware of them, but the new people in the fitness market aren't. But I think what CrossFit athletes do is extraordinary, and watching it is extraordinary, and that's why the athletes' social followings went through the roof, and they still go through the roof versus Hyrox athletes. And I don't think it's taken off as much with Hyrox because one, it's not as athlete focused, as you say, Adam, and I love Hyrox, by the way. I'm a bit of an addict, but it's not that impressive to watch, really, is it? Whereas like watching some of the CrossFit stuff is extraordinary. So I don't know if it'll ever have that traction. But I have heard from agents that like there is money coming into Hyrox now. Like I think, and I think Hyrox, the coverage is starting to be more athlete focused now they've wrapped up the consumer. So I'm probably completely wrong there. Like in the future, probably the athlete kind of pay packages and awareness for Hyrox might be the same as it was for CrossFit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in, like, I really want the sport of fitness to kind of grow. Like, I love sports, and if I'm honest, since I got into functional fitness and other sports, like I grew up kind of like football and a lot into American sports. So I grew up playing ice hockey, so I've always kind of loved sport. But as I got older, I kind of got more interested in the fitness of sport, as I'm guessing you might have as well. So I want to see it grow and continue to grow, and athletes kind of also. I mean, I know so many people have said this before, but CrossFit athletes and actually what they do, and compared to some other athletes, not to kind of say, oh, they're better than other athletes or anything like that, but I don't think people understand outside of functional fitness quite how impressive the ability to do what they do on a consistent basis, especially the amount of volume they're doing now, actually is. So I kind of want to see that grow and the stories be told. So I guess this is kind of a bit of a personal question. Just I hope it does continue to grow and want to see it grow. But yeah, it's interesting to see how it shapes.
That's just so difficult, though, isn't it? Because I totally agree. Like I said, it's extraordinary what they do versus HYROX athletes. But unless somehow, like physiologically, one of them can win both the CrossFit Games and HYROX, I don't know how it will. I don't know how CrossFit will like come back. Those athletes will be more relevant, and HYROX athletes will be even more relevant. Like Tia obviously made a decent stab at HYROX last year. Willie George did sub 60, but they're some way off at the top. And you could, like you said, it's what they have to do to achieve the top at CrossFit. It just isn't really helping them run 1K in 3:30, is it?
No. When you can, snatch and clean jerk, what some of the games athletes can do now, it's going to be hard to get down to a size that enables you to run as fast as you need to for HYROX.
But like the people that have done it, like Noah Chandler, Willie George, Tia, Christy Aramo, I think, Christy O'Connell, sorry, now, they've all run like proper times. So like maybe that's the key. Is it like you said, Adam? It's the sport of fitness. Like, yes, those guys are never going to be in the Elite 15, but they're not going to be that far off. So how do we maximize that? Like, how do they maximize that?
Yeah, I think that was, as you said, the exciting thing about Tia kind of seeming to be like, actually, I'm going to focus on this for a year or two, so that she could potentially maybe get into that Elite 15 and maybe not compete in CrossFit. So be interesting to see if she decides to continue that once she's had her second child. But I'd be really excited to see an athlete kind of manage to break into that. And I've forgotten her name off the top of my head, but one of the Elite 15 actually is an semi-final regional level CrossFit athlete. John will correct me on her name because he seems to remember everyone.
There's a few that's come in. I mean, even Lauren Weeks she was a semi-final level. You had Michaela Norman who won the Worlds. A lot of them kind of have some base in CrossFit because it was, I think a lot of athletes who were well conditioned in CrossFit but never strong enough were looking for an outlet, and HYROX came along and they kind of saw that as their outlet. There's another competition that seems to have jumped onto the scene as well, and Athics coming along. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it will get the HYROX momentum and continue to grow? Because obviously it's kind of feels similar to a Turf Games concept as well, and these two things now, I suppose, going in between CrossFit and HYROX, you have this middle ground starting to emerge with these competitions.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? I think they definitely seem to be getting traction. The events are all selling out. They're some CrossFit athletes are doing it. I think they're obviously getting them there for exposure, but I think Chandler's done it a few times, hasn't he? I don't know is the answer. I think that the problem they've got is they're focusing on the customer like HYROX, but they can't get 40,000 people through. So that they can only get. They've created this format which is fantastic, like 3 hours in and out. I totally get it. Like at Turf Games or CrossFit competition, you're there for the whole day and you're only there for 3 hours. But the limitations on the capacity could be a problem in the future. Now I don't know their model, so I might be wrong, but it definitely seems to be getting traction. I'm not quite sure who's doing it. Like I'd be really interesting to canvass like who identifies themselves as a CrossFitter, who doesn't at those events. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely seen some people that are maybe a bit more strength biased, but aren't fully in the CrossFit world, sort of entering into that over a HYROX, who perhaps struggle with the volume of running that's in a HYROX event. What about media, Dan? Like, obviously we're a podcast cover this stuff, but again, one of the things we talk a lot about is the kind of media landscape, because it's changed again an awful lot. How do you view that? What do you think the role of media within the sport of fitness, or the functional fitness space at all?
Huge. I think when, like John alluded to those glory years again earlier of CrossFit, and we all know that like the media team was huge, wasn't it? I mean, that was like the first thing that was cut in whenever it was, but it had an impact because, you know, we were seeing what these athletes were doing day in, day out. So it had a huge impact on CrossFit. And actually, to my point a minute ago, they are paying more attention to the athletes and media at HYROX now. And I think it will have an impact. There's still some way to go, but I think it does have a huge impact. I think ultimately media, good coverage of athletes doing great things is the gateway, isn't it, for most people? And I think, you know, those glory years for me, when I first came into sport, like 2012 to 2018, the media was so strong that's what kind of got you into it. So I think it's a bit fragmented, a bit messy, but it plays a huge part, that's for sure.
And do you think that that's something that will connect to what you're doing with WIT and the Fifth as well? That's something that you'll look to explore?
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely we will to a point. I think with WIT and also the Fifth, like ultimately, like the early days come down to kind of old school, like grassroots, authentic grassroots marketing. But yeah, media will definitely play a big part, and we've seen that have an impact in the past. I think another problem with the media that I was just going to mention, which like you two, I'm sure think is the same, but it's so political. The media like around CrossFit, and that's been a problem. Because like why is it so political? Maybe everything naturally becomes political, but I think that's had an impact on media access, who's covering what, who's watching what. Luckily, I don't think we get that. We don't have that in the UK, and we don't have that like in HYROX now. But yeah, that's been a bit messy over the last few years.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. John, any more thoughts? It's been a wonderful conversation, Dan. Thank you so much for your time. I'm really enjoying it, and like I said, I'm a big fan of the Fifth idea. So, and it's always nice to reminisce about some of the old CrossFit stuff. John, have you got any more any other topics you want to discuss before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think it's we can always keep talking about many of these aspects, but I think it's a great idea with the Fifth, and excited to see. You know, there's a whole generation now who seem to love training even more than we did. So I think this combination is going to be exciting to watch.
Yeah, excellent. And Dan,
I hope so.
Sorry, Dan. All I was going to say is, where can people, if they're interested in the Fifth or what's going on with WIT, what is there stuff coming up on the horizon that people should look out for? And if so, where should people go to check these things out?
So yeah, the Fifth is going to watch this space through to launch, but I'm going to launch a series of events from March to try and showcase a bit of what we're going to do. So I'm going to have like 2 to 3 hour events which always integrate fitness, but then layer on like a business summit. So access to like experts in the field for like small groups of curated people. So kind of curated networking events. So I'm going to do that for the next 3 to 6 months through to site opening. And yeah, for the Fifth, I'd follow my like LinkedIn or Instagram page, and the link is to the Fifth website to sign up. It is in the bio. And with regards to WIT, yeah, I'm not as involved day to day now. We've actually made a really exciting appointment recently. The UK audience will know like Fran Calvert, who's been in the space a while, super authentic. She's worked for March on a Rad. She's like come in as MD, reporting into the board. So that's a big step for us, like really, really relevant in the space. And I think it's a big year for WIT and the apparel and the direction that takes. So like I said, it's some challenging times bringing it back to market, but I think you'll see WIT kind of everywhere and anywhere with regards to like grassroots community stuff this year.
Amazing. Are you doing anything? I know there's been some events at District in recent years. Is stuff like that coming back with WIT?
We're doing something for the Open. And we're doing. I know we're at Method, great gym in Newcastle, and I think this shows that how much I'm doing day to day. But I think we're Newcastle, Manchester, and then back in London, like the 3 weeks of the Open. We're doing it with a brand, but it hasn't been announced yet, so I won't say it. But it's kind of like old school kind of, again, marketing, like activating the community in those gyms, in some of the best CrossFit gyms in the country.
Amazing. So, team, if you're doing the Open this year and you're listening to this and you're in those locations, definitely look out for it and get involved with those. It sounds excellent.
Yeah, please do. I mean, Method, I think, second on the leaderboard of people doing the Open, like over 300 people, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. So myself and John have been monitoring the Open signups every week on our weekly chat podcast, and yeah, we've been noticing that the numbers aren't quite as high as they were sort of a few years ago. So it's cool.
What are they?
That's a good question. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head.
It's around 120,000 right now.
So, and is it in 2 weeks or next week?
In seven days out. They kind of think it's going to go to, the prediction is just around 250 as the final number right now.
So that's the same as last year? Yeah. Wow.
It's slightly above, I think. It's tracking just under 2022 at the moment, which was since the COVID kind of the lowest signups apart from last year. So it's a bit better than last year, but not quite 2020 like 4 and stuff like that. So it's had a bit of a drop, sadly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan. John, thank you as ever. And team, thank you very much for listening. We will be back next week with our weekly update podcast and more guests to come soon. But thank you again, Dan, for your time. It's been a wicked conversation. And team, if you're interested in training, then check the program out as always, and the weekly mash if you want a fun workout to do at the weekend. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much, gents.
Thank you.